If you live in the city and you're tight on space, perhaps you've got a small balcony or your garden's already full, well, I've got an idea for a hanging planter that's going to make the most of your vertical space. For your hanging planter, you could really plant it up with anything. Flowers, herbs, strawberries would work really well. But I'm using ferns, and it all starts with this piece of marine ply. To make my planter box, I'm cutting two sides, 700 millimeters long by 318 wide, plus a base that's 300 mils square. But for the remaining two sides, I'm actually making them a little bit skinnier. I'm making it the thickness of the ply. That way, when it all goes together, it's going to be perfectly square. I've just marked out where I'm going to put some holes. Now, I've staggered these throughout the middle because that way we're going to get a nice organic look, and as the plants grow, it's going to give them space to fill out and really make this hanging planter look nice and lush. I'm just clamping it to the table, and then I'm using a 120 mil hole saw. 120 is going to give me plenty of room to get lots of nice plants in. So I'll be putting some timber glue on these joins and then screwing this together. I've countersunk it, and I'll just be using some 10 gauge screws. I'll be honest, I'm not very good at putting boxes together like this, so this could be quite amusing for everyone, but you can kind of see what I'm trying to achieve here. Now, we're leaving the top open, so when we plant and water later on, it's going to be much easier. I think I'll start with one of the bases and the sides and let the giggles begin. Well, that's not too bad, depending on what angle you look at it, but that's fine. Now, if you're so inclined, you could give the holes a little bit of a sand, but it's not imperative. What is imperative is waterproofing the inside of this box. I'm using just an exterior grade waterproofer. Now, that needs 2 coats with 12 hours drying time between the two, so I'm going to have a few cups of tea. I'm just giving our planter a lick of paint, and like the waterproofing, it's going to help preserve it for longer, and I've gone for black. Now, black works really well because when it's hanging up, it's going to disappear and put all the focus onto the plants, and then the plant foliage is really going to stand out with a dark background. Now, before we get on to filling this up with soil and plants, I'm just lining it with some geofab. Now, this is really important because it'll stop the soil from falling out the holes, but it also allows air and water into the plant's roots to keep them nice and healthy. It's time to fill our planter up, and I'm just using a premium potting mix. You want something that's free draining and got lots of fertilizer added into it. That way it's going to feed it for at least 6 months. I'm actually going to spray the geofab with just black spray paint so it disappears, and then cut a flap in there, which makes it easy to put the root ball in, and then I can pack more as we go up. Now, I'm planting my hanging planter up with ferns, and I'm doing that because it's quite a dark area, so they're well suited, and I love the limey green foliage in this spot. It's really going to stand out, but you could use anything, really. If you had a sunny spot, you could use something like impatiens. If you wanted to put in some herbs, that would be great, and like I mentioned before, strawberries would also work well. You'll notice I'm just teasing the root ball to get any excess soil off into the planter so I don't waste any of that potting mix, and then I'm actually dropping it into the plant and feeding the foliage out rather than doing it the other way around. That way, it's going to give you a much more natural appearance. put a bracket up on the wall, and that's to mount our planter box. When you're doing your brackets, you've got to remember, when this is soaking wet, it could weigh up to about 45 kilos, so it's got to be pretty sturdy. My number one tip, though, is get it up before you water it. Even though ferns can handle quite wet soils, too much water is just as bad as not enough. So I'm going to drill a couple of holes in the bottom to allow for drainage. Maintenance on your hanging planter couldn't be easier. You water from the top and just remove any dead leaves. Now, we used a premium potting mix, so we don't need to fertilise for about 6 months, but when you do that, a liquid fertiliser in the top and it will percolate down through the rest of the plants. And I think it looks great, and it goes to show no matter how much space you've got, you can still have a garden.